Greetings, fellow seekers of slumber, and welcome to a journey into a world spun from ice and fire. You know the stories of Westeros, the clash of kings, the dance of dragons. But what if I told you the true story of this land isn't written in castles of stone, but in the heart of ancient trees? That it begins in an age of forgotten magic, long before the first man ever dared to claim a throne. But before we part ways on this journey, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see all the corners of the world from which you gather. Now, with lights low and blankets near, let's gently wander into tonight's story. You find yourself standing at the very edge of a vast, sweeping land known as Westeros, a place of towering mountains, endless forests, and forgotten ruins. This isn't just any land, though. It's a realm steeped in layers of deep, complex history, each era built upon the bones and myths of the last. Imagine peeling back the skin of an old, gnarled tree to find the rings of its long life, each one a season, a storm, a quiet moment of growth. That's what understanding the lore of Westeros feels like. It's not just a backdrop for the dramatic squabbles of noble families, though those are certainly entertaining, but a living, breathing entity, its past constantly whispering in the present. You can almost feel the chill of ancient ice from the northern reaches, or the warmth of long, dead dragon fire from the south, all woven into the very fabric of the air around you. The world of Westeros is a meticulously crafted tapestry, rich with diverse cultures, ancient prophecies, and mysteries that even its own inhabitants struggle to understand. It's a place where every crumbling castle stone, every overgrown pathway, and every hushed tale carries the weight of millennia. Think of it as a historical onion, with layer after layer of events, each one contributing to the pungent, complex flavor of the present. And just like an onion, sometimes it makes your eyes water. The complexity isn't just for show, it gives a sense of realness to the fantasy, grounding the impossible in a believable chain of events. You see the echoes of old wars in the broken towers, feel the lingering magic in the shadowed groves, and hear the whispers of forgotten kings in the wind. This world demands your attention, not just for the battles and betrayals, but for the silent march of history that has shaped every conflict and every character. It's a place where the past isn't just prologue, it's a constant companion, often an inconvenient one. Like that one relative who always brings up that embarrassing story from your childhood. It's a world that existed long before any character you might know drew breath. A world shaped by ancient migrations, forgotten pacts, and cataclysmic events that reshaped the very landscape. When you look at the towering wall of ice, you're not just seeing a structure, you're seeing the lingering fear of a long dead evil, the testament to a time when the world truly hung in the balance. When you hear of dragons, you're not just hearing of beasts, you're hearing of a lost magic, a power that once dominated existence. Every element has its roots, its reasons, stretching back through countless generations. This deep history provides a powerful undercurrent, making the stakes feel higher, the victories sweeter, and the defeats even more tragic. It's truly a grand, messy, and utterly compelling story, and you're just getting started exploring it. Before the grand castles and the squabbling lords, you travel back through the mist of time, to an age when Westeros was a wild, untamed land, much colder and covered in dense forests. This is where the story of the first men begins, a tale of ancient migrations and the very first human footprints on this vast continent. Imagine countless generations ago, a hardy people, not unlike your distant ancestors who perhaps lived in simple mud and stick huts, arrived in this new world, crossing a land bridge from the eastern continent, a place they called Essos. This was back when the very idea of kings and crowns was as foreign as a talking raven. They came in their tens of thousands, perhaps driven by changing climates or simply the age-old human urge to see what lay beyond the horizon. They arrived carrying simple tools of stone and bronze, their knowledge of the world limited to the whispers of ancient winds and the practical needs of survival. You can picture them, These first men, hardy and resourceful, stepping onto the shores of what would one day be known as the Neck, a narrow strip of land connecting the vast northern wastes to the more temperate south. This land bridge, often called the Arm of Dawn, was a natural pathway, a testament to geological forces far grander than any human conflict. They weren't looking for kingdoms or thrones, merely new hunting grounds, fertile soil, and a place to build simple homes for their families. Their lives were harsh, dictated by the rhythm of the seasons and the constant struggle against a wild, unforgiving nature. They built homes from simple, local materials, much like the medieval peasants who would come much later, adapting to their environment with ingenuity rather than advanced technology. You might even chuckle imagining them trying to explain the concept of a thermostat to one another if they could even conceive of such a thing. Their arrival wasn't without conflict, however. Westeros was not an empty land. It was already home to strange, ancient beings known as the Children of the Forest. These small, shadowy figures with their bark, like skin and eyes like pools of amber or green, were not human. They were tied deeply to the land, guardians of its magic, and worshipped ancient tree, like entities known as weirwoods. The first men, in their relentless expansion, began cutting down these sacred trees to clear land for farming and settlement, a direct affront to the children's beliefs and way of life. This sparked a long, brutal war, a conflict of stone axes against obsidian daggers, human might against ancient magic. It was a clash of civilizations, or rather, a clash of emerging civilization against an older, nature-bound existence. You can imagine the confusion on both sides, the first men probably thinking the children were just odd, territorial forest spirits, and the children seeing the humans as loud, destructive invaders. After centuries of fighting, with losses heavy on both sides, a great peace was finally brokered. This was the Pact, signed on the Isle of Faces, a sacred place marked by weirwood trees with carved faces, where the first men and the children of the forest swore an oath to live in harmony. The first men agreed to respect the weirwood trees and the children's sacred groves, and in return, the children agreed to share the land. This pact ushered in an age of relative peace, a period where humans and these ancient beings lived side by side, learning from each other and sharing the secrets of the land. It's said that during this time, some first men even learned the old tongue, the language of the children, and began to worship the old gods of the forest themselves, bending a knee not to kings, but to the rustling leaves of ancient trees. This era, lasting thousands of years, laid the very foundation for the cultures and beliefs that would eventually emerge across Westeros, like the silent, deep roots of a massive tree that you never truly see but know are holding everything up. As the first men carved their lives into the ancient forests, you are now introduced to the Children of the Forest, the original inhabitants of Westeros, a people steeped in mystery and ancient magic. Imagine beings smaller than humans, with skin the color of bark and large, dark eyes that reflected the deep greens and ambers of the forest around them. Their fingers, long and delicate, were suited for weaving spells and crafting tools from obsidian, a dark, sharp volcanic glass. They moved silently through the dense woods, their presence often only hinted at by the rustle of leaves or a faint, haunting melody carried on the wind. These were not just creatures of myth. They were the living embodiment of the land's primal spirit, intertwined with every ancient tree and hidden spring. Their homes were not crude huts, but often living spaces carved into the roots of colossal trees or hidden deep within caves, perfectly blending with the natural world. The children of the forest worshipped the old gods, nameless deities of the trees, the rivers, and the stones. Their religious practices revolved around weirwood trees, ancient white, barked trees with red leaves and faces carved into their trunks. These trees were not just symbols, they were sacred conduits, believed to be the eyes and ears of their gods, allowing the children to see and hear events from vast distances and across time. Their magic was deeply connected to nature. They could whisper to the wind, call upon the animals of the forest, and even manipulate the very earth beneath their feet. Think of it as a quiet, flowing power, subtle yet potent, a stark contrast to the more overt, destructive magic that would later come with dragons and fire. Their spells were often sung, melodies carrying power, harmonies weaving reality itself. It must have been a strange and awe-inspiring sight for the arriving first men, seeing these small beings communicate with the natural world in ways they couldn't possibly comprehend. Unlike humans, the children of the forest lived in small, scattered communities, content to exist in harmony with nature rather than dominate it. They were hunters and gatherers, never building great cities or raising armies in the human sense. Their numbers were always few, their existence fragile in the face of the encroaching human population. When the first men arrived and began cutting down their sacred weirwood trees to clear land for farms and settlements, it initiated a long and brutal war, a struggle for the very soul of Westeros. The children, despite their smaller stature, fought fiercely, using obsidian weapons and their ancient magic to defend their ancestral lands and sacred groves. Imagine the desperation of a people fighting not for territory, but for their very way of life, for the preservation of a sacred bond with the land that the humans were carelessly destroying. It's a conflict as old as time itself, the clash between those who tame the land and those who revere it. This war, though devastating for both sides, eventually led to the Pact, a monumental agreement signed on the sacred Isle of Faces. This accord brought centuries of peace, an era during which the children and the first men lived alongside each other. During this time, some of the first men began to abandon their own gods and adopt the worship of the old gods of the forest, influenced by the children's deep connection to the land. This intermingling of cultures and beliefs subtly shaped the future of Westeros, particularly in the north, where the worship of the old gods remained strong for thousands of years, a testament to the enduring influence of the children. Even after their numbers dwindled and they retreated into legend, their magic and their reverence for the weirwoods continued to resonate through the land, a quiet hum beneath the surface of human history. They became the whisper in the leaves, the shadow in the deep woods, and the ancient memory embedded in the very earth of Westeros. Now, as the long peace between the first men and the children of the forest settled over the land, a new, far more chilling chapter began to unfold. You feel a deep, penetrating cold seep into the very air, a cold unlike any winter that had come before. This was the Long Night, a legendary period when a darkness fell upon the world that lasted for an entire generation. Imagine a winter so fierce and unending that the sun vanished from the sky for years, swallowed by an unnatural gloom. Crops withered, rivers froze solid, and the world plunged into an icy, perpetual twilight. This wasn't just bad weather. It was a cosmic catastrophe, a brutal teacher who didn't believe in second chances. During this endless night, a terrifying new threat emerged from the farthest north, the White Walkers, or as some called them, the Others. These ancient, humanoid figures, with eyes like piercing blue ice, brought with them an army of the dead, reanimated corpses known as Whites, shambling horrors with frozen flesh and glowing blue eyes. They were not merely cold. They radiated a deep, life-sucking chill that could shatter steel and freeze men in their tracks. Their arrival turned an already dire situation into an existential war for survival. The first men, hardened by centuries of life in a wild land, and the children of the forest, with their subtle magic, found themselves facing an enemy beyond their comprehension, one that seemingly could not be killed by conventional means. This was the ultimate test of endurance, where every morning you woke up still breathing was considered a minor miracle. It was like a very unwelcome houseguest who showed up in winter and refused to leave. Except this guest also brought an army of frozen zombies and a personal vendetta against all living things. The White Walkers and their whites swept south, leaving a trail of death and ice in their wake. Forests became silent, frozen cemeteries, and even the most formidable warriors fell before their chilling power. Villages and settlements were abandoned as people fled before the encroaching cold and the horror of the animated dead. It was a time of immense despair, when hope was a flickering ember struggling against an icy gale. People huddled together for warmth and comfort, knowing that privacy was a forgotten concept when survival meant sharing every last scrap of body heat with family, neighbors, and even livestock. The only light came from sputtering hearth fires, which valiantly tried their best but mostly just roasted the toes of whoever was sitting closest, while leaving everyone else to shiver. In their darkest hour, the surviving first men and the children of the forest put aside their past differences and united against this common enemy. They discovered that the White Walkers could be harmed by dragonglass, a dark, sharp obsidian, and that the Whites could be killed by fire. This knowledge, born of desperate trial and error, became their only hope. Legends speak of a great hero, Azor Ahai, who forged a sword of living fire, Lightbringer, and led the living in a final stand against the darkness. This epic struggle, known as the Battle for the Dawn, pushed the White Walkers back into the far north. After the long night finally ended, and the sun returned to the sky, the people of Westeros vowed never to forget the threat they had faced. They knew such a horror could return. This terrifying period etched itself into the collective memory of Westeros, becoming a cautionary tale whispered through generations, a grim bedtime story to remind everyone that some enemies are far worse than rival lords. It was a painful, brutal lesson, teaching them that while a full stomach might help you survive a cold night, it certainly wouldn't save you from an army of the dead. With the long night finally over and the White Walkers driven back into the icy, desolate lands beyond human reach, the survivors of Westeros faced a daunting task: how to prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again. You find yourself standing at the foot of an impossibly tall structure, a colossal barrier of ice, stone, and ancient magic that stretches for hundreds of miles from coast to coast. This is the Wall, one of the most iconic and enduring structures in Westeros, a frozen guardian against the terrors of the far north. Its construction marked the end of the long night and the beginning of a new era of vigilance. Imagine a defensive barrier not merely built by men, but imbued with a magic so potent that it would stand for thousands of years, weathering countless storms and holding back unspeakable evils. The legends say the wall was built by Brandon the Builder, a legendary figure from the Age of Heroes, often depicted as a man of immense will and almost supernatural skill. He was aided by the children of the forest, who, despite their earlier conflicts with humans, understood the dire threat posed by the White Walkers and their army of the dead. Their ancient magic, tied deeply to the very earth and its old gods, was crucial in solidifying the ice and stone, weaving spells into its very core to prevent anything otherworldly from passing through. Think of it as the ultimate magical glue, holding together a frozen monument that defied natural laws. This collaboration between humans and the children, born from shared terror and a desperate need for survival, highlights the sheer scale of the threat they had faced. It's a reminder that even the most stubborn enemies will team up when faced with a common monster, though you can imagine a few grumbles from both sides about whose methods were truly superior. The wall itself is a marvel of ancient engineering. Even without factoring in the magic, it towers hundreds of feet high, wide enough at its top for a dozen armored riders to pass abreast. The ice is not smooth but irregular, jagged in places, with vast stretches of solid, ancient white, and other parts streaked with grey from earth and rubble that has been incorporated over millennia. On its northern side, the land falls away into the haunted forest, a desolate, unforgiving wilderness where the last remnants of the White Walkers were believed to reside. To the south, the land gradually slopes down into the human, settled regions of the north, a stark contrast between the wild cold and organized life. The climate around the wall is perpetually harsh, biting winds whip across its towering face, and snow is a constant presence, piling up in drifts that could swallow a horse whole. if you thought your apartment was drafty because the window didn't close properly, the builders of the wall would probably just stare at you with polite indifference and point to the hundreds of miles of open, freezing air they had to contend with. To guard this colossal structure, the Night's Watch was formed, an ancient order of sworn brothers who forsake all personal ties and desires to dedicate their lives to protecting the realms of men. They wear black, live austere lives, and swear an oath to serve until their death, guarding against the return of the ancient darkness. Their castles, built along the wall, are grim, cold outposts, often sparsely manned and always battling the encroaching ice and the wild elements. These men, once fierce warriors, criminals, or lost souls, stood as humanity's first and last line of defense against a forgotten enemy. The wall thus became more than just a physical barrier. It was a symbol of humanity's stubborn refusal to yield, a testament to ancient fears, and a silent promise to the future that the terrors of the long night would not be allowed to return. It embodies a chilling sense of perpetual waiting, like a very patient bouncer at the coldest, most exclusive club in the world. As the Andals reshaped Westeros with their iron and new gods, you cast your gaze further east, across the narrow sea, to a land that truly understood power and magic on an unprecedented scale. This is the story of the Valyrian Freehold, a legendary civilization that rose to become the most dominant force in the known world, a beacon of advanced knowledge, intricate art, and, most famously, dragons. Imagine a place of shimmering cities, massive structures carved with impossible precision, and families who wielded fire and shadow as easily as others might wield a simple sword. The Valyrian Freehold originated in the Valyrian Peninsula, a fertile land in Essos. Unlike the first men or the Andals, the Valyrians were not a simple people. They developed a unique culture centered around magic, bloodlines, and the mastery of dragons. It's said their ancestors were shepherds who discovered dragons nesting in the 14 Flames, a chain of massive volcanoes that formed the backbone of the peninsula. Through methods that are now lost to time, these shepherds learned to tame and ride the dragons, forging an unbreakable bond with these terrifying beasts. This mastery of dragons gave the Valyrians an unparalleled advantage, allowing them to conquer and expand their influence across a vast empire without rivals. Think of it as having nuclear weapons in a world still figuring out bronze, a truly unfair advantage that led to centuries of unchallenged dominance. The Valyrian Freehold was not a kingdom ruled by a single king, but a complex republic governed by powerful noble families, or dragon lords, who each possessed dragons and vast wealth. Their cities, built from fused stone, were architectural marvels that defied time and weather, often described as beautiful and alien in their construction. They were renowned for their advancements in metalworking, particularly for crafting Valyrian steel, a magical metal that was incredibly strong, light, and held a razor-sharp edge, easily distinguishable by its distinctive wavy pattern. The secrets to forging Valyrian steel are lost, making any blade of it an incredibly valuable and sought-after treasure in later ages, like a lost recipe for the world's greatest, most durable sandwich. Their influence extended far beyond their peninsula, establishing colonies and trading outposts that stretched across Essos. From the great cities of the free cities like Volantis and Pentos to the ancient lands of the Giscari Empire, which they famously conquered 5 times. The Valyrians were also masters of sorcery, utilizing blood magic and other dark arts, practices that many in later ages would consider forbidden and dangerous. Their magic was intricate and powerful, woven into their daily lives, their architecture, and even their very bloodlines. It was a civilization that embraced both beauty and brutal power, achieving feats of engineering and magic that later generations could only marvel at, barely comprehending how such things were possible. Their culture was rich, complex, and filled with pride, believing themselves to be destined to rule the world. They were often described as fair-haired and purple-eyed, traits that would later be seen in the Targaryen family, a noble house who was one of the lesser dragonlord families from Valyria. Despite their immense power and seemingly unbreakable dominance, a shadow loomed over the Valyrian freehold. Their reliance on the volatile 14 flames for their dragons and their magic was a constant, unspoken risk, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. You can imagine the irony of a civilization so advanced, so powerful, still living at the mercy of the very geological forces that gave them their greatest strength. You have just witnessed the unparalleled might of the Valyrian freehold, a civilization built on dragonfire and ancient magic. But now, feel a tremor ripple through the very ground, a distant rumble that grows into a deafening roar. This is the doom of Valyria, a catastrophic event that, in a single day, annihilated the most powerful empire the world had ever seen, leaving behind only ruins, legends, and a handful of survivors. Imagine the impossible becoming horrifyingly real, a vast, flourishing civilization swallowed whole by the very forces it sought to master. The doom was not a war or an invasion, it was a natural disaster of epic proportions, an event so cataclysmic that it shattered the Valyrian peninsula and extinguished almost all life upon it. It's said that all 14 of the mighty volcanoes, known as the 14 Flames, which were both the source of Valyria's dragon, birthing magic and its constant, unspoken threat, erupted simultaneously. This wasn't just a volcanic eruption, it was a chain reaction, a violent convulsion of the earth that ripped apart mountains, boiled seas, and turned cities into ash. Rivers of molten rock poured from the earth, tsunamis crashed upon the coasts, and the very sky was choked with ash and fire. The screams of dragons and dragonlords, once symbols of invincibility, were silenced in an instant. It was like a very bad day for real estate. If your real estate happened to be an entire magical empire built on a giant, unstable powder keg. The scale of the destruction was absolute. The proud cities of Valyria, carved from fused stone and thought to be impregnable, crumbled and melted under the intense heat. The vast, fertile lands of the peninsula were utterly devastated, transformed into a smoking wasteland of fractured islands and boiling waters, a place now known as the Smoking Sea, where no ship dares to sail. The sheer magical energies unleashed by the doom were so immense that the region became a perpetual zone of danger and mystery, cursed by dark, unpredictable magic, and haunted by the lingering echoes of ancient power. If you were a cartographer trying to update your maps that day, you'd probably just throw your hands up in exasperation and redraw the entire eastern part of your known world as "Here be dragons and extremely bad times." The most significant consequence of the doom was the near total extinction of dragons. Only a handful of these magnificent beasts survived, belonging to the Targaryen family, one of the lesser Valyrian noble houses. This family, led by Aenar Targaryen, had heeded a prophetic dream from his daughter Daenerys, known as Daenerys the Dreamer, who foresaw the destruction of Valyria. They moved their entire family, their wealth, and their 5 dragons to the remote island outpost of Dragonstone, off the coast of Westeros, 12 years before the doom struck. This seemingly paranoid decision turned out to be the salvation of their house and the key to Westeros's future. The doom of Valyria plunged the world into a new era. With the greatest power gone, a void was left, and the once fragmented regions of Essos began to reassert themselves. The various free cities, formerly colonies of the Freehold, became independent powers, each vying for influence and trade. The world was forever changed, reminded that even the most formidable empires can be undone not by men, but by the raw, untamed forces of nature, leaving the Targaryens as the last living link to a glorious, terrifying past. With the ashes of Valyria still settling over Essos, a new chapter began to unfold in Westeros, one that would irrevocably shape its future. You are now witnessing the arrival of the last true dragons in the world, carried by the Targaryen family, who, having narrowly escaped the doom, set their sights on a fragmented continent across the narrow sea. This is the story of Aegon's conquest, the pivotal event that unified the disparate 7 kingdoms under a single rule, forever changing the political and cultural landscape of Westeros. For centuries after the doom, The Targaryens remained on Dragonstone, a small island fortress off the eastern coast of Westeros, observing the continent from afar. They were a shadow of their former Valyrian glory, possessing only 3 dragons, but these magnificent beasts, Balerion the Black Dread, Meraxes, and Vagar, were living weapons unparalleled in power. Meanwhile, Westeros was a patchwork of independent kingdoms, constantly warring amongst themselves. The Kingdom of the North, the Kingdom of the Mountain and the Vale, the Kingdom of the Isles and the Rivers, the Kingdom of the Rock, the Kingdom of the Reach, the Stormlands, and Dawn. Each was ruled by its own proud king or lord, all too busy squabbling over land and old grudges to notice the calm ambition brewing on a nearby island. It was like a neighborhood full of bickering children, unaware that a very quiet, very well-armed adult was about to move in next door and tell them all to play nice, or else. Around 300 years before the main events of Game of Thrones, Aegon Targaryen, a young, ambitious dragonlord, finally decided it was time to claim Westeros. He wasn't seeking conquest for mere land. His vision was to unite the warring kingdoms under one banner, creating a realm strong enough to withstand any future threat, perhaps even the return of the White Walkers, a distant memory that still lingered in ancient texts. With his 2 sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys, also dragon riders, Aegon landed with a small army on the eastern coast of Westeros, at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush. This landing site would eventually become King's Landing, the capital of the unified realm. The sheer audacity of his claim, 1 man, 2 wives, 3 dragons, and a few thousand soldiers against 7 kingdoms, was breathtaking. It was a gamble so audacious that it stunned the continent, like someone showing up to a knife fight with a flamethrower, then politely asking everyone to form an orderly queue. The conquest itself was swift and brutal, though not without its strategic brilliance. Aegon avoided unnecessary bloodshed where possible, offering surrender and fealty to any lord or king who would bend the knee. Those who refused faced the terrifying wrath of his dragons. Castles that had withstood centuries of sieges crumbled under dragonfire in moments. Armies were routed not by swords, but by the sheer terror of winged beasts raining down fire from the sky. The Field of Fire, where the armies of the Reach and the Rock were burned to ash by Balerion, became a chilling testament to dragon power, forcing the last independent kings to surrender. 6 of the 7 kingdoms bent the knee, their rulers choosing submission over total annihilation. Only Dawn, with its fierce, adaptable warriors and a unique, unyielding spirit, managed to resist Aegon's dragons, holding out for another 200 years until a peaceful marriage pact finally brought them into the realm. Aegon established the Iron Throne, forged from the swords of his defeated enemies, as the seat of his new dynasty, and set about building a unified realm. His conquest marked the end of the Age of Kingdoms and the beginning of Targaryen rule, an era of dragon-backed power and centralized authority that would last for nearly 3 centuries, proving that sometimes all it takes is a really big, scaly threat to get everyone to finally agree on something. The 7 kingdoms had been unified under the Targaryen dragons. A new era of peace, backed by fire and blood, had begun. But even the mightiest dynasty is not immune to internal strife. You are now about to witness one of the most devastating civil wars in Westerosi history, the Dance of the Dragons. This brutal conflict, fought within the Targaryen family itself, pitted dragon against dragon and kinsman against kinsman, leaving the dynasty weakened and its majestic beasts on the path to extinction. Imagine a family argument that escalated beyond uncomfortable silence and simmering resentment, straight into full-blown aerial combat with colossal flying lizards. The Dance of the Dragons occurred over a century after Aegon's conquest, during the reign of King Viserys I Targaryen. Viserys, a good-hearted but indecisive king, faced a succession crisis. His only surviving child from his first marriage was his daughter, Princess Rhaenyra, whom he had named his heir, making her the first woman to be declared heir to the Iron Throne. However, after his second marriage, he fathered several sons with his new wife, Queen Alicent Hightower. When Viserys died, the realm was split. Rhaenyra's supporters, known as the Blacks, championed her claim based on Viserys' decree. Alicent's faction, the Greens, argued for her eldest son, Aegon II, citing ancient tradition that favored male heirs. This wasn't just a political disagreement, it was a deeply personal schism, tearing apart the royal family and forcing every noble house in Westeros to choose a side, like a very tense family reunion where half the cousins showed up with dragons. The war began with the swift, terrifying descent into dragon-on-dragon combat. Both sides possessed numerous dragons, the legacy of Valyria's survival. You can picture it. The skies over Westeros, once the unchallenged domain of a single royal family, now filled with the terrifying roars and flashing fire of dueling beasts. It was a spectacle of unimaginable power and destruction, a brutal dance of death where the very ground trembled beneath the aerial battles. Cities were burned, armies were incinerated, and the countryside was laid waste as these creatures, once symbols of Targaryen might, became instruments of their self-destruction. The dragons, though magnificent, were not immune to human petty squabbles, and they paid the ultimate price for it. It was a chaotic aerial ballet of fire and scales, an event so visually spectacular and horrifying that subsequent generations would swear it was a punishment sent directly from the heavens, perhaps for a monarch who couldn't decide on a simple family tree. The human cost of the Dance of the Dragons was immense. Countless lives were lost, noble houses were decimated, and the realm was plunged into a state of chaos and famine. But the most tragic outcome was the decimation of the Targaryen dragons. Many were killed in battle, others succumbed to wounds, and some were simply too wild to be controlled by their inexperienced riders. By the end of the conflict, the majestic creatures that had forged the Iron Throne were almost entirely gone, never to truly return in their former glory. The Dance of the Dragons permanently weakened the Targaryen dynasty, stripping them of their most potent weapon and ushering in an era where their rule, while still absolute, rested on political maneuvering rather than overwhelming force. This brutal civil war served as a grim lesson even with dragons. A family divided will ultimately fall, leaving a legacy of bitterness and a scarcity of large, winged, fire-breathing pets. The Dance of the Dragons had left the Targaryen dynasty scarred, and the once mighty dragons were now little more than a distant memory. Yet, the thirst for the Iron Throne remained, and with the dragons gone, the battles for power shifted from the skies to the brutal ground of men. You now turn your attention to a series of conflicts that repeatedly challenged Targaryen rule, the Blackfire rebellions. These were not external invasions but bitter, bloody civil wars fought by different branches of the Targaryen family, further weakening their hold on Westeros and highlighting the inherent instability of a throne built on ambition rather than universal love. Imagine the Iron Throne as a very shiny, very uncomfortable chair that everyone wants, even if it means tearing the family apart to get it. The Blackfire rebellions began nearly a century after the Dance of the Dragons, sparked by the ambition of Daemon Blackfire. Daemon was a legitimized great bastard son of King Aegon IV Targaryen, a notoriously weak and decadent king. Aegon IV, on his deathbed, legitimized all his bastard children, a decision that proved catastrophic. Among these bastards, Daemon was particularly formidable, a skilled warrior, charismatic leader, and wielder of Blackfire, the ancestral Valyrian steel sword of Aegon the Conqueror, which his father had controversially given to him instead of his legitimate heir, Daeron Sikarai. This act instantly positioned Daemon as a rival claimant to the throne, as he possessed the sword that symbolized Targaryen kingship. It was like giving your slightly less favorite child the keys to the family sports car, while the actual heir gets the sensible sedan. The first Blackfire rebellion erupted when Daemon, feeling his claim to the throne was stronger than that of his half-brother, Daeron II, rose in revolt. His supporters believed that Daemon, with his martial prowess and claim to the legendary sword, was more kingly than the scholarly and peaceful Daeron. This conflict plunged the Seven Kingdoms into a brutal civil war, pitting brother against brother and house against house. The fighting was fierce and bloody, culminating in the Battle of the Redgrass Field, one of the largest and most devastating battles in Westerosi history. Although Daemon Blackfyre himself was killed during this battle, along with his twin sons, his rebellion was ultimately crushed by the Loyalist forces. But the seeds of dissent were deeply sown. The victory was costly, both in terms of lives and the lingering resentment it fostered among the defeated Blackfyre supporters. It was a very expensive family argument that left a lot of people dead and even more people holding a grudge. Despite the defeat of the First Rebellion, the Blackfyre challenge did not end. Over the next several decades, 4 more Blackfyre rebellions would erupt, each led by a different descendant of Daemon Blackfyre. These conflicts, though progressively less successful, continued to plague the Targaryen kings, forcing them to constantly defend their claim against rival contenders who could also boast dragon blood, even if they lacked the dragons themselves. The Blackfyre pretenders often found support among lords who felt slighted by the ruling Targaryens, or who simply yearned for a return to a more Valyrian style of kingship, whatever that might have meant without fire-breathing beasts. These rebellions were a constant drain on the Targaryen treasury and their political stability, eroding public trust and creating deep divisions within the nobility. The legacy of the Blackfyre rebellions was a weakened Targaryen dynasty, a realm often on edge, and a reminder that even legitimate claims to power could be challenged by charisma, a legendary sword, and a father's ill-advised deathbed wishes. The Iron Throne, it seemed, was always surrounded by whispers and daggers, even from within its own bloodline. With the Targaryen dynasty overthrown and Robert Baratheon now on the Iron Throne, you observe the intricate web of power woven across Westeros by its great houses. These aren't just families, they are the pillars of the realm, each with centuries of history, distinct customs, powerful armies, and a deeply ingrained sense of pride. Imagine a continent-spanning reality show where the main characters are constantly vying for influence, all while trying to maintain their ancient family brand. First, there are the Baratheons, now the ruling house of the Seven Kingdoms. Their seat is Storm's End, a mighty fortress built to withstand the fiercest storms, located in the Stormlands. Their sigil is a crowned black stag on a golden field, and their words, "Ours is the fury." Founded by Orys Baratheon, Aegon the Conqueror's half-brother and rumored bastard, the Baratheons embody strength, directness, and a fierce, often impulsive, nature. You can almost hear Robert Baratheon himself bellowing their words, a man whose love for hunting and feasting was only matched by his capacity for rage and his utter disinterest in the day-to-day work of ruling. Their dominance is a fresh development, a direct consequence of Robert's rebellion, marking a significant shift from the dragon-blooded rule of the Targaryens. Then you have the Starks of Winterfell, the ancient and proud rulers of the north. Their ancestral seat is Winterfell, a massive, ancient castle built upon hot springs, allowing it to remain relatively warm even in the harshest northern winters. Their sigil is a grey direwolf on a white field, and their chilling words, "Winter is coming." Descended from the first men, the Starks are known for their honor, stubbornness, and deep connection to the old gods of the forest. They are often seen as grim and unyielding, reflecting the harsh lands they govern. Their culture is less influenced by the Andals, maintaining many older traditions that have been lost in the south. They're basically the cool, quiet kids who prefer the solitude of the woods to the noisy parties of the city. And they probably judge your flimsy southern clothing. Across the continent, in the fertile lands of the Westerlands, reside the fabulously wealthy House Lannister of Casterly Rock. Their sigil is a golden lion on a crimson field, and their words, "Hear me roar!" Though their unofficial, and far more infamous, motto is, "A Lannister always pays his debts." Known for their cunning, ambition, and vast riches derived from the gold mines beneath their ancestral seat, the Lannisters are a force to be reckoned with. Led by the shrewd and ruthless Tywin Lannister, they are a family that understands power and is not afraid to wield it, often with ruthless efficiency. Their entry into Robert's rebellion at the very last moment, sacking King's Landing, secured their place at the heart of the new regime, proving that sometimes being fashionably late can be extremely profitable. In the sun-drenched southern reaches, you find the Martells of Dawn, whose seat is Sunspear. Their sigil is a golden spear piercing a red sun, and their words, unbowed, unbent, unbroken. The Martells are a unique house in Westeros, having resisted Aegon's conquest for centuries through guerrilla warfare and diplomacy, eventually joining the realm through marriage rather than conquest. This history has given them a fiercely independent spirit, a more egalitarian view of gender roles, and a distinct, often passionate, culture. Their refusal to conform to typical Westerosi traditions sets them apart. Like that one relative who always brings exotic dishes to Thanksgiving and then judges everyone else's bland mashed potatoes. The Martells, with their distinct customs and history of defiance, represent a powerful, proud force within the Seven Kingdoms, always ready to challenge the status quo. As you delve deeper into the complex tapestry of Westeros, it becomes clear that not all forces shaping its destiny are visible swords and political maneuvering. You now encounter the subtle, yet profoundly influential, role of magic and prophecy, elements that ripple beneath the surface of the known world, occasionally bursting forth to alter the course of history. Imagine a faint hum of ancient power, always present, sometimes ignored, but capable of turning the tide of the greatest conflicts. Magic in Westeros is often described as a waning force, a whisper from an older age. However, its presence is undeniable, if sometimes unpredictable. From the ancient, earth-bound magic of the Children of the Forest, who could manipulate nature and connect with weirwood trees, to the fiery, blood-based sorcery of old Valyria, magic has always been a part of the world. Yet, by the time of Robert's rebellion and the subsequent rule of the Baratheons, true magic was largely dismissed as myth or parlor tricks in most of Westeros. The realm had largely embraced a more rational, less mystical worldview, akin to people today dismissing ancient folklore as mere superstition. This skepticism, however, often left them unprepared for the rare, brutal resurgence of genuine magical power. Prophecy, on the other hand, is a more nebulous but equally compelling force. Throughout Westerosi history, there are numerous prophecies and ancient legends that hint at future events, often in cryptic and open-ended ways. One of the most significant is the prophecy of Azor Ahai, a legendary hero from the Long Night, who is foretold to return to fight against the darkness once more. This prophecy speaks of a prince that was promised, who will be reborn amidst smoke and salt, wielding a flaming sword to defend the world against the encroaching cold. While the exact interpretation is hotly debated and often misinterpreted by those who seek to fulfill it, the prophecy maintains a powerful hold on the minds of some, driving their actions and beliefs. It's like having a very old, very vague instruction manual for saving the world, written in riddles, and everyone thinks they're reading it correctly. The influence of magic and prophecy is often seen through various characters and their experiences. Blood magic, though rarely practiced and widely feared due to its dark nature, holds immense power. The Red Priests and Priestesses of Allah, the Lord of Light, found mainly in Essos, demonstrate a more overt form of magic, calling upon fire and shadow for visions, resurrections, and even assassinations. These foreign magical traditions often clash with the traditional, more grounded beliefs of Westeros, creating suspicion and fear. Visions and dreams also play a critical role, often foreshadowing events or offering glimpses of forgotten truths. Daenerys the Dreamer, for instance, famously foresaw the doom of Valyria, prompting her family to move to Dragonstone and thus ensuring the survival of the Targaryen line. Her prophetic dream, though dismissed by many, was a pivotal moment in history, a stark reminder that some whispers from the unseen world carry immense weight. Despite the pervasive skepticism, especially in the more civilized parts of Westeros, There are always those who believe, those who delve into ancient texts, and those who seek out the last vestiges of true magic. The children of the forest, now almost entirely vanished from human sight, continue to exist in the deep forests beyond the wall, their ancient magic and connection to the weirwoods representing a primeval power that still flows through the land. The very presence of the White Walkers, though considered myth by many, is a chilling testament to the lingering magic of the world, and their eventual return would shatter the illusions of a purely rational realm. Magic and prophecy, therefore, are not merely fantastical embellishments. They are deeply woven threads in the grand tapestry of Westeros, constantly influencing events, shaping characters' destinies, and ensuring that even in a world obsessed with crowns and castles, there is always room for the impossible and the terrifying. They are the cosmic wildcards, waiting to flip the table when everyone least expects it. You have journeyed through the ancient past of Westeros, witnessed its defining conflicts, and observed the subtle influence of magic and prophecy. Now, as our exploration of its lore draws to a close, you are left with the enduring legacy of this rich and often brutal history, a continuous narrative that shapes every present moment and hints at future conflicts. The story of Westeros is not just a collection of disconnected events. It is a meticulously woven tapestry where every thread, no matter how old or seemingly insignificant, contributes to the overall design. The past in Westeros is never truly past. It is a living, breathing entity that constantly influences the present. The ancient arrival of the first men and their long war with the children of the forest left a deep cultural imprint, especially in the north, where the worship of the old gods and a hardy, honorable disposition endured for millennia. The long night, that terrifying period of unending winter, and the rise of the White Walkers, remains a chilling cautionary tale, whispered through generations and commemorated by the colossal wall. This deep-seated fear of the encroaching cold and the dead is a primal undercurrent, always threatening to resurface and unite or divided the disparate human factions. You can feel the weight of these ancient fears in the very air of the north, a constant reminder that something truly terrifying once walked the earth. The subsequent waves of migration and conquest, particularly the Andal invasion, brought new faiths, technologies, and social structures that fundamentally reshaped Westeros. The faith of the Seven, along with the iron, working prowess of the Andals, became dominant in the southern kingdoms, creating a stark cultural and religious divide with the north that persists to this day. This blending and clashing of cultures gave rise to the great noble houses you are familiar with, each with its own proud history, unique traditions, and sometimes very complex family issues that are probably best not discussed at holiday dinners. These historical layers create a sense of authenticity, showing that the current state of the realm is a direct consequence of long-forgotten events and ancient choices. It's like watching a very long game of historical chess, where every move from 1,000 years ago still impacts the current board. Even the mightiest empires eventually fall. The rise and catastrophic doom of Valyria, which wiped out the Dragon Lords and their incredible power, is a stark reminder of how quickly even seemingly invincible civilizations can vanish. Yet, from its ashes, the Targaryens emerged, conquering Westeros with their surviving dragons and forging the Iron Throne, ushering in centuries of dragon-backed rule. Their subsequent civil wars, like the devastating Dance of the Dragons and the recurring Blackfire rebellions, served to weaken the dynasty from within, ultimately paving the way for its violent overthrow in Robert's Rebellion. These conflicts showcase the cyclical nature of power in Westeros, where ambition constantly vies with destiny, and the quest for the throne often leads to bloodshed, ensuring that no ruler ever truly rests easy. The enduring legacy of Westeros' history is a sense of constant flux and potential upheaval. Prophecies, often ancient and ambiguous, still hold sway over the faithful, hinting at future events and the potential return of both heroes and unimaginable evils. Magic, though rare, is never truly gone. lurking in the shadows and capable of reshaping the world when least expected. Every major character and conflict in the present narrative is deeply intertwined with these historical roots, whether they know it or not. The lore provides the depth, the motivation, and the chilling resonance that makes the battles for power, the personal betrayals, and the looming threats feel profoundly real and consequential. It is a world that invites you to lose yourself in its intricate past, reminding you that sometimes the oldest stories are the ones that hold the most power.